So last video we were talking about diffusion and factors affecting the rate of diffusion, and that was for, in general, simple cells or single-celled organisms. Now we're going to be talking about, stepping it up, leveling it up, and talking about diffusion in multicellular organisms. So an example of a multicellular organism would be humans. And the reason we need exchange surfaces and a transport system is because we have a lower surface area to volume ratio. Because if you think about it, we're a lot bigger than, for example, a bacteria cell. So diffusion is basically when dissolved substances move into and out of our cells across the cell membrane. So where does diffusion take place in animals, and what is being transported via diffusion? We have a few different examples. And the first one on the diagram on the bottom right is talking about our lungs. So here, if you zoom in really closely, we've got this alveoli. And around the alveoli is the blood vessels. So what is being diffused here? Firstly, oxygen. We need oxygen for respiration, and it passes from the air into our lungs, into our red blood cells. And this crosses the cell membrane through diffusion. Oxygen moves down a concentration gradient. So what this means is that the oxygen moves from a region of high to low concentration. And then oxygen also moves by diffusion down a concentration gradient from the blood cells into the cells of the body where it's needed. So it goes away from the lungs, transported throughout the body through the blood, and then reaches, for example, the brain, our stomach, our muscles, all of the organs around our body which need oxygen. The other gas that's being diffused here is carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide moves out from the body cells into the red blood cells because it's a waste product. And then it goes through the red blood cells into the lungs. And it goes out of our body through the air in our lungs by diffusion, down a concentration gradient, which is quite similar to the way that oxygen is being transported. And the process of diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide in opposite directions is known as gas exchange. And this occurs, like we said, in the alveoli of the lungs. This next diagram represents diffusion in liver cells. So urea is the thing that's being diffused here, and urea passes from the liver cells into the blood plasma. So the blood vessel is the tube we can see in the middle, and then this goes from the liver to the kidneys and where it's excreted. So when we say excreted, we mean removed from the body. Another place that diffusion occurs is in the small intestines. So in our small intestines, we absorb sugars, proteins, and fats, and this absorption occurs through diffusion. So this is from the food that we take in, we break it down, we absorb these nutrients, and it goes into our blood vessels where it's transported to the liver, and these nutrients are used throughout our body. So diffusion also occurs in plant cells as well. So we can see here, plants, just like animal cells and us humans, require oxygen. So the oxygen goes in through the holes on the bottom of the leaf, and then what does it release? It releases carbon dioxide. So plant cells carry out respiration as well, but remember that they also carry out photosynthesis. So what is photosynthesis? That is when they use carbon dioxide to make oxygen. So again, gas exchange occurs here. So we've talked a lot about the different places that diffusion can occur. Now let's talk about how cells are adapted for diffusion. So individual cells may be adapted to make diffusion easier and occur faster. And the most common adaptation is to increase the surface area of the cell membrane. And how cells increase the surface area is by folding up the membrane. And therefore, because they're folded, for example, the tissue lining of an organ is folded, there's more space for diffusion to occur. And another way that diffusion could be increased is by having a thin cell membrane. So this membrane provides a short diffusion pathway, so it's easy for molecules to get through. In animals, they have an efficient blood supply. So like we said, for humans, taking away the blood in the lungs, so taking away the oxygen and then bringing in the carbon dioxide. And another thing would be ventilation for gas exchange in animals. So when we say ventilation, we mean breathing in and carrying in the oxygen into our lungs, and then breathing out and pushing out this carbon dioxide away from our lungs. So that's it for diffusion. Thank you.